Kaylara moved through the ashes like a ghost. Her feet made no sound. Her sharp eyes scanned the horizon, always alert. Smoke curled from the burned trees, and distant echoes of gunfire rumbled like thunder. The world around her was broken. The sky, once blue, was now stained with gray. This planet, once her home, had become nothing more than a battlefield. She was the last of her kind. Once, Kaylara had a team, brave warriors, sisters and brothers in arms. They fought together against the Kriv, cruel invaders from the dark corners of space. The Kriv were monsters in metal suits. They came without warning, destroyed cities and left nothing alive. Her people resisted, but it wasn't enough. One by one they all fell. Kaylara survived. Not because she was lucky, but because she refused to give up. Her armor was scratched. Her weapons were old. She had no base, no command center, no backup. Just her will to keep fighting. Each morning she woke up. She checked her traps, sharpened her blades, and watched the skies. If the Kriv found her, she would be ready. Today was no different. Kaylara climbed to a ridge where the wind blew hard. From there she saw the ruined city below, once a beautiful place filled with music and lights. Now it was silent. Broken towers, shattered roads, and blackened bones. She adjusted her visor, searching for signs of movement. Nothing. She sat quietly and took a sip from her canteen. The water tasted bitter, but she didn't complain. Warriors didn't complain. Suddenly she heard a sound. It was soft, almost too soft. But she had trained her ears to hear everything. A click, then another. Metal boots. Someone or something was near. She dropped flat to the ground and crawled behind a fallen log. Her fingers touched the hilt of her blade. Then she saw it. A small patrol of Kriv, 3 in number, walking through the dead trees. Their glowing red visors scanned the area. One of them carried a long energy rifle. Another had a drone buzzing above his shoulder. Kaylara narrowed her eyes. These were scouts. That meant more would follow. She had to take them down quietly. She moved like a shadow, slipping behind rocks and fallen branches. She circled them, waited for the right moment. When one of them stepped too far from the group, she struck. Her blade sank into the enemy's side with a burst of sparks. The other, too, turned in shock, but it was too late. Kaylara leaped and rolled, dodging fire, and ended them both within seconds. When the last one fell, she breathed deeply. She checked the bodies for supplies. A few power cells, some rations, and a torn piece of map. Useful. She burned the rest. No trace. No mercy. That was the rule now. Later, she sat by a quiet stream. She dipped her blade in the water, washing the black blood from its edge. The wind carried the scent of rain. She looked up at the sky. It had been 5 years since the invasion. 5 years of silence. 5 years alone. Her memories haunted her. The face of her younger brother who had died in the first wave. The voice of her commander telling her to run. The final stand at the citadel. The promise she made to survive, to fight, to never forget. Kaylara was not just a warrior. She was a witness to the end of a people. And yet, even with all her strength, something inside her was fading. Hope. Sometimes at night she would sit by a small fire and talk to the stars. She would whisper to them as if someone out there might be listening. She didn't expect an answer, but the silence hurt less when she spoke. That night, she noticed something strange. One of her traps, set days ago near the old comm tower, was triggered. She hadn't heard any alarms, but the signal was blinking on her old wrist display. Her heart raced. Had the Kriv found her camp? She grabbed her weapons and moved fast. Trees passed like shadows as she ran through the forest. Every sense was on high alert. But when she reached the trap, she paused. The tripwire had been carefully disabled. Not broken. Disarmed. Her eyes widened. The Kriv didn't do that. Whoever did this was smart. And not Kriv. She checked the ground. A single boot print. Small. Different from her own. Human. Kalara rose slowly and looked around. The wind blew gently. The leaves rustled. For the first time in years, a new thought entered her mind. She was not alone. Kalara crouched near the disarmed trap, her eyes scanning every tree and rock. The air felt heavier now. She had lived in silence for so long that even the faintest sign of another person felt loud in her mind. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from something stranger. Curiosity. She touched the wire. It had been gently moved aside. The knot, loosened with care. Whoever passed through didn't want to cause harm. But why were they here? And more importantly, who were they? Kalara stood up and followed the boot print. It was fresh. She could tell by the way the soil was still pressed down and not yet filled with dust. She followed it slowly, one step at a time. The track led deeper into the woods, far from Kriv patrol zones. Whoever this was, they were either very clever or very lost. As the sun dipped behind the clouds, shadows stretched across the forest. Kalara moved quietly. She knew how to blend with the trees, how to make herself invisible. She had become one with this battlefield. Then she saw it. A small camp, hidden under thick branches covered by a reflective sheet that camouflaged with the surroundings. Someone had dug a small trench just enough to rest in. Beside it sat a pack, a broken helmet and something else. Human food packets. Her eyes widened slightly. The writing was in Earth Standard. She stepped forward carefully, scanning for traps. None. Whoever set this up was careful but not expecting to be followed. Suddenly she heard a soft sound like a cough. She spun around, blade raised. There he was, a human male, dressed in half-damaged armor. His helmet was off, showing a face covered in dust and a short beard. His left leg was wrapped in cloth, injured. He held a tool in one hand, not a weapon, but still raised in defense. They stared at each other. Kalara didn't move. He didn't either. Seconds passed like minutes. Finally, the man broke the silence. "You're not Kriv," he said. His voice was rough but calm. Kalara didn't reply. She kept her weapon ready. "I guess you're wondering who I am," he continued. "Name's Ryan. I'm from Earth. Scout team, long-range recon. My ship crashed near the ridge." He gave a small smile. "Didn't think I'd see anyone alive out here." Kalara lowered her blade only a little. "You're alone?" she asked. He nodded. "Wasn't supposed to be, but things go wrong. You know how it is." He shifted slightly, wincing as his leg moved. "You're not Kriv either? You, one of the natives? The warriors they talked about?" Kalara gave a slight nod. "I am the last." Ryan's smile faded. He looked down. "I'm sorry." There was a long silence again. Kalara could have left, but something made her stay. This man, this human, had survived here, like her, and he was not her enemy. In fact, he seemed like the first kind face she had seen in years. "You disarmed my trap," she finally said. "I didn't want to set off alarms," Ryan replied. "I figured someone smart made it. Didn't want to make enemies if I didn't have to." Kalara studied him. He was careful, respectful, and honest. That was rare. "Your leg," she said. "Infection?" "Not yet. But if I keep walking, maybe." Kalara looked around. "This camp is not safe. Kriv patrol this area." Rion nodded. "Yeah, figured I had one night at best." She paused. Then she said, "Come with me." His eyebrows rose. "Are you sure?" "No one survives long alone." Ryan chuckled weakly. "You did." Kalara turned. "I survived. I did not live." That answer made him quiet. He packed quickly, limping, as he followed her through the trees. She moved ahead, clearing a path and watching for signs of danger. Ryan followed slowly, breathing hard but staying close. After an hour, They reached a small cave hidden behind thick vines. Inside, it was dry and safe. Kelara had turned it into a shelter long ago. She lit a small lantern, and the soft light filled the space. "Sit," she said. Ryan did, sighing as he rested his leg. Kelara handed him clean bandages and let him use her tools. She said nothing as he worked. He was grateful for her silence. When he finished, he looked up. "Thank you." Kelara simply nodded. They sat quietly. The fire cracked gently. Outside, the night wind howled. "I thought I'd die out there," Ryan whispered. "I didn't think anyone would find me." Kelara replied softly. "I thought I would die alone." He looked at her. "You won't," he said. "Not anymore." The cave was quiet. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, but inside, the small fire gave warmth and light. Kelara sat near the entrance, her back straight, always alert. She stared into the darkness, watching, listening. Ryan rested against the stone wall with his leg stretched out. He had wrapped it again, using better cloth and antiseptic from Kelara's supplies. He still winced with every movement, but he was used to pain. He didn't complain. He watched her from time to time. Her armor was worn, but her posture was proud. She barely blinked. She was more than a soldier. She was a survivor. "You don't talk much," Ryan said softly. Kelara glanced at him. "Words are not needed to survive." "Maybe not," he replied with a slight smile. "But they help people stay sane." She didn't argue. She just turned her gaze back to the trees. Rion looked around the cave. It was small but cleverly built. There were hooks carved into the wall to hold tools, a small tunnel at the back for escape, and even a trap at the entrance. Everything had a purpose. This place had protected her for a long time. "You made all this?" he asked. "Yes." "How long have you been out here?" Kelara hesitated before answering. 5 years. Ryan's eyes widened. 5 years? Alone? She gave a short nod. He leaned his head back against the stone. "That's incredible." "No," she said. "It is survival, not victory." Ryan could hear the pain in her voice, though she tried to hide it. He understood. War took things from people, friends, family, hope. It left them with silence and memories. He decided not to push her with more questions. Instead, he took out a small device from his pack. It was a broken communicator. Kelara turned her eyes toward it. "That won't work." "I know," Ryan said, "but I'm trying to fix it. If I can get it working again, maybe I can reach my fleet. Let them know I'm alive." "There is no signal on this planet," she replied. "The Kriv block everything, I figured." "Still," he said, adjusting the wires. "Trying is better than doing nothing." Kelara respected that. He didn't give up easily. After a long pause, she finally asked, "Why did you come to this planet?" Ryan looked up at her. "I was part of a scout mission. We picked up a weak distress signal. It was old, probably sent during the first Kriv invasion. My team was sent to check it out. We didn't expect anything to be alive." He smiled faintly. "Turns out we were wrong." Kelara didn't smile, but something softened in her eyes. She stood and walked to a small container. She took out a dried food bar and tossed it to him. "Eat. You'll need strength." "Thanks," Ryan said, catching it. They ate quietly. The food was plain, but enough. Later, Ryan leaned back and looked at the stars through a small gap in the cave wall. "Back on Earth, we used to lie on grass and watch the stars for fun. People made wishes on them." Kelara tilted her head. "Wishes? Yeah, like hoping for something better. Does it work?" He chuckled. "Sometimes. Not always, but it gave people hope." She was quiet. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "I haven't made a wish in a long time." Ryan looked at her. "You should. Maybe start with something small." She didn't reply. But she didn't walk away either. As the night passed, they shared stories in low voices. Ryan told her about Earth, blue skies, green forests, oceans that stretched forever. Kailara listened without interrupting. She had never seen Earth, but it sounded like a dream. Ryan noticed her silence and said, "You don't have to keep carrying everything alone, Kailara." She looked at him sharply. "I must." "No," he said gently. "You had to. Until now, but you're not alone anymore." Those words hit her deeper than he knew. She turned away, hiding her face. No one had spoken to her like that in years. "I don't know how to stop fighting," she whispered. "Then let me fight beside you," Ryan replied. She turned to him slowly. In his tired face, she saw no weakness, only strength and something more: understanding. He wasn't just another soldier. He was a human who still believed in something beyond war. For the first time in 5 years, Kailara felt a strange feeling in her chest. Not fear. Not anger. Hope. The days passed slowly in the quiet of the cave. Outside, the wind howled and the trees swayed, but inside it was peaceful, too peaceful for Kailara. She had lived so long in a world filled with noise and violence. The silence now felt unnatural. Ryan seemed to adjust easily to the stillness, even if his legs still pained him. He worked on the broken communicator every day, determined to get it working. Even though Kailara knew there was no signal, she didn't stop him. He was determined, and that determination felt different. It was something she hadn't seen in a long time. He had found a routine. Every morning, he would sit by the fire, eating his ration, and would try to fix something. Usually his armor, sometimes an old piece of equipment, but always something. He didn't sit still for long. When he wasn't working, he was walking, even with his limp, learning the land, taking notes and gathering small supplies. At night, they would share stories. Sometimes Kailara would speak of her people, how they fought with honor, how they were betrayed by their own leaders. She had no love for the past, but she had a respect for the warriors she once stood beside. Ryan, in turn, told her about Earth, about the tall mountains, the vast oceans, and the cities full of lights. He spoke of families and children, of peaceful times when humans lived without war. For Kailara, it was all new, and for the first time in a long while, she felt something shift in her heart. But still, she couldn't shake the fear of trusting someone again. Ryan was kind, and his words were comforting, but she was not used to kindness. In her world, kindness had been replaced with violence and sorrow. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Kailara sat on the ledge of the cave, watching the last rays of light slip away. Ryan was busy with his repairs, but she felt the weight of the day settle around her like a heavy cloak. The forest had become darker, more dangerous, with nightfall creeping in. She stood up suddenly, feeling restless. "I'm going out," she said, turning toward Ryan. He looked up from his work. "It's almost dark, Kailara. You'll need to rest." "I don't need rest," she replied. "The night is the time to hunt." He hesitated, then stood. "I'll go with you." She gave him a sharp look. "You're injured." "I can manage," Ryan said with a small grin. "You need backup, right?" Kailara didn't answer immediately. She knew he was right, but she didn't want him involved. The nights were dangerous. The Kriv were ruthless, and even the smallest mistake could be fatal. She had never needed help, and the thought of relying on someone made her uneasy. But then she remembered his words. "You're not alone anymore." Against her better judgment, she nodded. "All right, stay behind me." Ryan gave a quick nod, his eyes bright. "Deal." They moved quickly through the forest, silent as shadows. The woods seemed to close in around them, but Kailara moved with ease, guiding them through the thick underbrush. She felt the familiar rush of adrenaline in her veins. The hunt was on. They reached the edge of a clearing, and Kailara crouched behind a boulder, peering into the night. The air smelled different here, heavier. The distant hum of Kriv machinery was faint, but unmistakable. "There," Kaylara whispered, pointing to a group of Kriev soldiers stationed around a campfire. They were too far away to see them clearly, but Kaylara's eyes were sharp. She could make out their heavy armored forms standing guard. Ryan crouched beside her. "How do you want to do this?" Kaylara considered for a moment. There were too many to take head on, but there were always ways. She turned to Ryan, her gaze steady. "I'll create a distraction. You'll move around and take out the sentries. We meet back here." He nodded, his expression serious. "Got it." Kaylara moved first, slipping through the shadows. She wasn't afraid of the fight, but there was something else that bothered her. The fact that she was trusting someone again. She didn't have the luxury of making mistakes. She reached a fallen tree and used it to hide. With a quick motion, she set a small explosive device beneath the edge of the tree. The blast would be enough to get their attention. As soon as the device went off, she sprinted toward the Kriv, moving silently. Rian followed suit, circling behind them, waiting for his chance. The explosion echoed through the forest, and the Kriv soldiers rushed toward the sound. Kaylara wasted no time. She launched herself at the nearest soldier, her blade cutting through his armor with ease. She moved like lightning, taking down the others quickly, without hesitation. Meanwhile, Ryan was just as efficient, taking out the sentries with clean, precise moves. He had learned quickly. Kaylara had to admit she was impressed. When the last of the Kriv soldiers lay on the ground, Kaylara paused, breathing heavily. The fight had been fast, but it had been fierce. She turned to find Rian still standing, looking at her with a mix of awe and admiration. "You're good," he said, his voice low. Kaylara didn't smile. "I've had to be." Rian stepped forward. "We make a good team." Kaylara hesitated before she nodded. "Yes, we do." For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the weight of something more than just survival. The days that followed the battle were calm, but Kaylara couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. The forest, once peaceful, now felt heavy, as if the very trees were holding their breath. Ryan had noticed it too. He had become more alert, even with his injured leg slowly healing. His sharp eyes, always searching for danger, seemed to scan every movement around them. They continued their daily routines, training, fixing equipment, and talking about Earth. It was becoming easier, almost natural, to share these moments. But Kaylara knew that peace was always temporary on a battlefield. She had learned that lesson long ago. One evening, just as the sun began to sink behind the horizon, Kaylara and Ryan were sitting by the fire. The sky was darkening and the air was cooling. Rian was adjusting his armor, the metal pieces clinking softly, when the hairs on Kaylara's neck stood up. A sound, not the usual rustling of leaves or the call of distant animals. It was something else, closer, more deliberate. She stood abruptly, her eyes scanning the forest. Ryan followed her movement, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. "Do you hear that?" Kaylara whispered. Ryan nodded, his face growing serious. "It's coming from the north." Kaylara narrowed her eyes. The wind was still, but the forest felt alive with tension. Something was wrong. "We need to move," she said, her voice low but commanding. Ryan didn't question her. They gathered their things quickly, each motion practiced and precise. As they moved toward the edge of the cave, Kaylara's thoughts raced. The Kriv were relentless. They had to be. Their empire had been built on conquest, and they never stopped. But what if it wasn't just the Kriv? What if something worse was coming? They reached the clearing, and Kaylara crouched behind a cluster of bushes, her keen eyes scanning the horizon. The sound grew louder, a deep, rumbling vibration that echoed through the earth. "It's them," Kaylara said, her voice tight with tension. Ryan looked at her. "The Kriv?" She nodded, her jaw clenched. "But it's not just patrols. This is something bigger. I can feel it." Without another word, they slipped into the trees, moving quickly but quietly. They needed to get closer, see what they were up against. As they made their way through the dense woods, Kaylara's mind raced. The Kriv had never attacked like this before. They usually relied on their superior numbers and overwhelming firepower, but this felt different. They reached a high ridge overlooking a wide open field. Below, Kalara saw them. Ships. Massive ships. More than she had ever seen in one place. The Kriv fleet had returned and they had brought reinforcements. Her breath caught in her throat. These were no ordinary warships. These were advanced massive vessels, each one bristling with weaponry, far stronger than anything Kalara had faced before. And there were dozens of them. "This isn't just an invasion," she whispered. "They've come to wipe us out." Ryan crouched beside her, his face pale. "What are we going to do?" Kalara's heart raced. The odds were against them, and the thought of fighting these ships felt impossible. But she had fought impossible battles before, and somehow, she had survived. She wasn't going to stop now. "We prepare," Kalara said, her voice firm. "We fight. And we survive." She turned toward Rion. "We need to warn others. This isn't just about us anymore. They'll destroy everything." Rion looked at her, his eyes full of determination. "You're not doing this alone." Kalara nodded. "I know." They moved swiftly back to the cave, gathering everything they would need. Kalara knew this battle wouldn't be easy. She could feel the weight of it pressing down on her chest. But she also knew that they had one thing the Kriv didn't: the will to survive. As the night passed, Kalara couldn't sleep. She sat by the fire, sharpening her blade, her thoughts drifting between the past and the present. The memories of her people, of the ones she had lost, haunted her. But Ryan's words echoed in her mind too. "You're not alone anymore." She stood up suddenly, her hand on her sword. She couldn't sit still. They were coming. She had to prepare. There was no time to waste. "Kalara?" Ryan's voice broke through her thoughts. He was standing by the entrance, his expression grim. "We'll fight together," she said quietly, her voice filled with resolve. "We will win." Rion walked toward her, his eyes meeting hers. "I'm with you. Always." She nodded. Together they gathered what little ammunition they had and prepared for the fight of their lives. The Kriv might have their warships and their armies, but they didn't have the one thing that Kalara and Rion had: the strength to fight for something greater than themselves. As dawn broke, the first ships of the Kriv fleet began their descent toward the planet. Kalara's heart pounded in her chest as she stood with Rion, her sword in hand. The battle was about to begin, and she was ready. She had fought alone for too long. Now she had a partner, a warrior by her side, and together they would face the storm. The morning sky was darkened by the shadow of ships as the Kriv fleet descended upon the planet. The sound of their engines rumbled in the distance, an eerie reminder of the destruction they would bring. Kalara stood at the ridge, staring down at the battlefield below. The sight of the ships, vast and imposing, filled her with a strange sense of dread. But beneath that dread there was something else: resolve. "We don't have much time," Rion said, his voice breaking through the silence. He stood beside her, his face drawn but determined. Kalara nodded. "We fight here. This ridge is the highest point. We can use it to our advantage." The plan was simple. They would hold their ground at Dusk Ridge, the only strategic position where they could see the enemy's movements. The Kriv would have to cross the open fields below before they could reach the ridge, and Kalara and Ryan would be ready for them. "Do you think we stand a chance?" Ryan asked, his voice softer than usual. Kalara looked at him, her eyes steady. "We don't have a choice. We fight because we must." Ryan nodded, then turned to gather the few weapons they had prepared. The lack of ammunition weighed heavily on both of them, but it was a fight they couldn't avoid. Together they worked in silence, checking the traps Kalara had set, making sure the terrain was ready for the battle ahead. Ryan moved slower than usual, his legs still aching from the her injury, but he didn't complain. He knew what was at stake. Kalara looked over at him as he adjusted his rifle. "You're still injured." "I'll manage," Ryan replied, his gaze hardening. "I've survived worse." She didn't argue. She couldn't afford to waste time on things they couldn't change. Every second counted now. The sky above darkened as the Kriv ships grew nearer. The unmistakable hum of their engines filled the air, vibrating through the ground. It wouldn't be long before they landed. Kaelara's heart pounded in her chest, but her mind was clear. She was ready. "We're ready," Kaelara said, turning to Ryan. "We can't let them get past us." Ryan gave her a brief, tight smile. "Let's do this." The first wave of Kriv soldiers appeared on the horizon, their heavy boots kicking up dust as they marched toward the ridge. Kaelara and Ryan took their positions, hidden behind rocks and trees, waiting for the right moment. The Kriv came into view, their towering figures covered in thick metal armor. They moved with precision, like machines, their weapons raised and ready. There were at least 50 of them, far more than Kaelara had hoped. But she didn't flinch. She had survived worse odds. The first soldier came into range, and Kaelara's breath caught in her chest. She raised her rifle, aiming for the leader of the group. The shot rang out loud and clear. The soldier collapsed, his helmet dented, but the others quickly scattered. They returned fire, but Kaelara and Ryan were already moving, darting from cover to cover. "We've got their attention now," Ryan said, his voice steady. "Keep moving." Kaelara nodded and fired again, taking down another soldier. They moved in perfect sync, each shot hitting its mark as they took out one Kriv soldier after another. But there were too many, and their weapons were not as powerful. "As the Krivs, get to the left flank," Kaelara shouted. "They're trying to outmaneuver us." Rion nodded and sprinted to the left, his rifle raised. He fired, hitting another soldier who had tried to take cover behind a rock. Kaelara continued to fire, picking off the Kriv one by one, but it was clear they were outnumbered. The enemy kept coming, relentlessly. Kaelara's chest tightened with each passing moment. She had fought countless battles, but this felt different. There was something about this fight that made it feel like the final one. She couldn't lose, not now, not after everything she had been through. Rion's voice broke through her thoughts. "Kaelara, they're flanking us from the right." She turned quickly, spotting a group of Kriv soldiers moving toward the ridge's edge. She raised her rifle and fired, but one of the soldiers returned fire, and she felt the bullet graze her shoulder. "Damn it," she shouted, retreating behind a boulder. Her vision blurred slightly, but she didn't let the pain stop her. She couldn't. Ryan was beside her in a flash, checking her wound. "It's not bad. Keep fighting." "I will," Kaelara said, gritting her teeth. "We're not done yet." The battle raged on, the sound of gunfire filling the air. The Kriv were relentless, but Kaelara and Ryan were equally determined. They held their ground, fighting with everything they had. The ridge was theirs, and they wouldn't give it up. Hours passed, and the sun dipped lower in the sky. Kaelara and Ryan were both exhausted, their bodies bruised and bloodied, but they didn't stop. They couldn't. The Kriv had to be pushed back. And then, just as Kaelara thought they might be overrun, she heard something unexpected. A loud roar echoed from the trees, followed by a crash. The ground shook, and Kaelara turned to see a massive beast charging toward the Kriv. It was a creature from the wilds, one that Kaelara had never seen up close before, but she recognized it immediately. It was fierce, powerful, and it tore through the Kriv like a knife through cloth. Kaelara blinked in disbelief. "What is that?" "I think it's our backup," Ryan said, a grin breaking through his exhaustion. The creature rampaged through the battlefield, scattering the Kriv soldiers. It was chaos. The Kriv were losing their footing, and Kaelara and Ryan took full advantage of it, picking off stragglers and pushing forward. By the time the sun set, the last of the Kriv soldiers had retreated. The battlefield was littered with bodies, both Kriv and the wild creature that had turned the tide. Kaelara stood among the wreckage, breathing heavily. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. She turned to Ryan, her eyes meeting his. "We survived," she said quietly, her voice full of something more than just relief. "Together," Ryan replied, his gaze steady. "We fought together." The night after the battle was quiet. The echoes of gunfire had faded, replaced by the soft sounds of wind rustling through the trees and the distant calls of creatures in the forest. Kylara stood at the edge of the battlefield, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The sky was slowly lightening as dawn approached, and with it, a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The Kriv had retreated, their once mighty army shattered. The battlefield was littered with wreckage, burnt armor, twisted metal, and the remains of the wild creature that had turned the tide in their favor. But the battle was over, and for the first time in a long time, Kylara allowed herself to relax. She turned back to the cave where she and Ryan had taken shelter. He was sitting by the fire, his rifle resting beside him. His leg was still injured, but he had pushed through the pain, just like she had. They had fought side by side, and now they were both alive. Kylara approached him quietly, her boots crunching on the gravel beneath her. Ryan looked up as she neared, offering her a tired but warm smile. "We did it," he said, his voice low but filled with pride. Kylara nodded, sitting down beside him. Her body ached from the fight, but the exhaustion felt different now. It was the kind of exhaustion that came after victory, not defeat. They had won together. "We did," she agreed, her voice soft. "But we didn't do it alone." Ryan tilted his head, raising an eyebrow. "You mean?" "I mean," Kylara said, glancing toward the ridge where the battle had taken place. "For the first time, I wasn't alone. I had you." Ryan looked at her for a moment, then nodded, a serious look crossing his face. "I'm glad you had me," he said. "And I'm glad I had you." Kylara turned to face him, her eyes locking with his. The tension between them had been growing over the past few days, and now, in the quiet after the battle, she realized just how much she had come to rely on him, not just for survival but for something more, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. "I never thought I could trust anyone again," Kylara said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was meant to fight alone, always." Ryan smiled softly. "You don't have to fight alone anymore. Not if you don't want to." For a moment, Kylara didn't speak. She simply looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. The thought of trusting someone, of letting them in, had always seemed impossible. But Ryan had been there by her side, through every fight, every battle, every moment of doubt. He had never wavered. "I don't want to fight alone anymore," Kylara finally said, her voice firm. "But I need to be sure us, it's real, right?" Ryan's smile widened. "It's as real as the sunrise. I'm here for the long haul, Kylara." She felt something stir within her, a warmth, a light that had been buried under years of grief and loss. She had lived through hell, but now, with Ryan by her side, there was hope. The future didn't seem so dark anymore. She reached out and touched his hand, feeling the steady beat of his pulse beneath her fingers. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything. They had made it through the worst of it, and now, together, they had a chance at something better. "I'm not afraid anymore," Kylara said, her voice steady. "Not with you." Ryan squeezed her hand gently. "Then let's build something, together, not just a fight, a future." Kylara's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had never thought about the future. Her only concern had been survival. But now she realized that survival wasn't enough. She wanted more. She wanted a life with him. "We'll make it work," she said, her voice filled with certainty. The fire crackled softly between them as they sat in the quiet, each of them lost in their thoughts. The world had changed in ways they couldn't have imagined. But Kylara knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The sun finally rose, casting a warm golden light across the landscape. The first light of a new day, a new beginning. And as Kylara and Ryan stood together, looking out at the horizon, they knew that the battle for the future was just beginning. But this time, they would face it side by side. And no matter what the galaxy threw at them, they wouldn't be alone.